I'm Dr. Michael Vargo, and I'm a faculty member in the Behavioral Sciences Department at Grand Rapids Community College, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Robert Bullard, who's the Ware Distinguished Faculty Member in Environmental Sociology at Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Bullard, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
Dr. Bullard, you were supposed to give a lecture last night, but unfortunately we were snowed out. And you're going to come back in the spring, I've heard, so I'm happy to hear that it's being rescheduled.
That's correct. It's my pleasure. Can't wait to get back.
Well, hopefully after the snow has melted a little bit. Because you weren't able to lecture last night, I thought it might be really nice to give people an understanding, a foundation understanding in what it is that you're about. You're heralded as the father of environmental justice, and I thought that it would be nice to hear from the father of environmental justice what that constitutes. Can you tell us about that?
Well, actually, the environment is something that is very dear to me, and over the years we've discovered that the environment impacts everybody, but everybody is really not involved in trying to address issues as it relates to who gets impacted by the negative impacts of development and et cetera. And so way back in 1978, my wife, who was from Grand Rapids, as a matter of fact.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, we moved from Grand Rapids in 1976 to Houston, and 2 years out of graduate school, I was asked to collect data for this lawsuit that she had filed. She's a lawyer. And that dealt with the location of a municipal landfill, and so that's how I got involved. And I collected data for that lawsuit, and we discovered that in Houston, Texas, all of the city-owned landfills were located in predominantly black communities, and 6 out of the 8 of the incinerators were located in black communities, and 3 out of 4 of the privately owned landfills were located in black communities, although African Americans only made up 25% of the population. Yeah, so that's how I got involved, and back then there were no computerized databases, there was no geographic information systems or spatial mapping, so we had to do this by hand. I had 10 graduate students, and we got involved. We started doing the research, and I started writing, and for the last 30 years I've written 14 books on housing, transportation, land use, industrial facility siting. It's 14 books, but it's actually one book, but don't tell anybody, that deals with the whole issue of the environment. And the way that we define environment is everything. It's where we live, work, play, worship, go to school, as well as the physical and natural world. And so environmental justice basically says that all communities have a right to be free from pollution and from environmental degradation, and that environmental justice movement is basically an extension of the civil rights movement.
It's been interesting to see, and I think gratifying to see, concepts like sustainability and environmental justice and social equity trickling down into the language of the general media and the popular press. And I suspect that we've got people like you to thank for the presence of that language, keeping those issues in front of us on a regular basis like that.
Yes, what we've always said is that if we are to achieve a sustainable society, then there must be, a clean environment. There must be, economic development, of course, but there also must be equity. And so if we talk about economics, environment, and equity, that three-legged stool, if one of the legs is kicked out from under it, it'll fall. And so we have been talking and saying, if we address many of the equity issues and social justice issues as we move forward to building a healthy and sustainable society, I think we will achieve really a just society if all those things come together, and that there's no one group that has a monopoly on environmental concern. And even though we may not have lots of people of color and low-income people who are members of the big environmental groups, that does not mean that there's not concern. And so the environmental justice movement was born out of trying to diversify, if not color coordinate, the larger environmental movement. And so many of the organizations that I work with are very small organizations, grassroots organizations, community-based. Oftentimes they don't have staffs and budgets, but they have a lot of enthusiasm and they have heart. And so it's this grassroots movement, environmental justice movement, that has been able to change the way that we see environmentalism and as it's practiced in this country and throughout the world. As a matter of fact, environmental justice is now has achieved its global status because this is an international and global issue.
Without question, it affects all of us. I was looking at your biography and I was impressed at how productive you've been. How do you keep up your energy for this? It's a struggle essentially, isn't it?
Well, the way I see it, this is the issues that we deal with now in terms of justice, sustainability, dealing with prevention, and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so over the last 30 years, what really gives me hope and an optimistic outview is that in order to work with young people, students, and every social movement in this society that has been successful has had a strong youth student movement, whether it was peace and justice, anti-war, civil rights, women movement, you name it, it's had young people. And so I love my job. I'm a teacher at heart, and to be involved in the classroom and do the research and have students use our communities as laboratories to learn and teach, that's, I think, is the most important part of my job and keeps me young at heart.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you feel like you're pretty lucky to have found yourself that role in your life.
I think so, and it's a passion. And when you see laws changing, regulations changing, you see young people, students that you have taught, and they come back to you, 10 years later or 5 years later and say, Dr. Bullard, I'm a lawyer, I'm an environmental engineer, I'm a community organization leader, and et cetera. And you see that you are making a difference, so that one person can make a difference. And I think as long as we see it in that context, we just can't say we have to have everybody. It would be great if we could have everybody on board, but as long as we have a strong, dedicated cadre of people who are saying we're not going to stop until this is solved, I think that's important.
I saw also that you had worked with the Clinton administration to help draft a presidential requirement that all federal agencies consider environmental justice in their decision making. That must have been very, very satisfying and gratifying in that respect.
It was very satisfying to see that the work that you've been doing with community groups all across this country had actually trickled up from community-based organizations to the states and even reached the White House. And when the president signed that executive order on environmental justice in 1994, and when you get invited to the White House, and it was the only time I've been in the Oval Office, must be a great office, but to see that it had actually reached the highest levels of power, and to see Congress starting to talk about these things today, and to have hearings, and to see states, at least 36 states have passed laws and executive orders to deal with environmental justice. And the state of Michigan, just this year, the governor signed an executive order or mandate to deal with environmental justice, which I think is very important.
Have you seen continuous positive development with the present administration as well?
Well, each administration has its own way of dealing with it. When we got started, it was under the first Bush administration. And then when Clinton came in, he expanded it. And this administration, we've seen some pushback, but I think the fact that we like to think of this is not a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue. When we talk about the environment and healthy communities, these are basic American rights. These are basic human rights, and I think it's important that we look at it in that context. And the communities that are out there are working on these issues from coast to coast, and I think they're not going to turn back no matter who's sitting in the governor's chair or who's sitting in the White House.
Do you see, and this is a global issue like you've mentioned, do you see the focus, the energy that we're putting on this to be similar or different from the energy that we're seeing from other developed nations?
Well, what we've seen when I went to the Earth Summit in 1992, there were 12 of us environmental justice activists, leaders, scholars that went, And we were scrambling trying to get our message heard, because many people around the world think of the U.S. as this great developed country with very few problems, and we had to point out that there are lots of environmental problems in many communities that some cases are very similar to what's happening in many of the developing countries. And so what we've had to do is to look at these issues and talk about, when we resolve the environmental problems in this country, in our borders, we don't want to shift them abroad. We don't want to use the same kinds of problems and strategies to create other problems abroad. And so we've had to work with many of the NGOs in developing countries in the third world to build collaboratives, to build trust. And I think the issues of climate, for example, is one issue I think is a major environmental justice issue for the 21st century. And if we are to be a world leader and a global leader, I think the U.S. has to step up and begin to address many of the issues that are being talked about around the world, and climate change is one of those issues.
Do we have that status now, do you think? Are we a world leader in that area?
Well, we are the single superpower, but when it comes to addressing many of the issues around climate, I think we are bringing up the rear. I think there have been some progress made in the last couple of years, but I still think that we haven't gotten there. And with Al Gore, now with a big E on his chest and winning, Nobel Prize, and I think it's getting there, and I think more Americans are aware of this issue, and I think the change will come from the outside. The pressure will be put on our government from just ordinary people and people who say that we have to do something because we don't have time to just debate this, we need to act. And I think that we're getting there. And as I said, the last couple of years we've seen much more forward movement than the last 10.
To go back to your roots, have you seen changes in how waste facilities are being sited in communities now? Are you able to detect the increased awareness having actually some impact in the way these foundational issues are being determined?
Well, I think the fact that many communities today are much more aware of what their rights are and what they can do when it comes to waste management. And I think this whole idea of waste should follow the path of least resistance in communities that don't have a lot of power and resources to fight or whatever. I think more and more groups are now have resources to fend off, which is forcing our society to talk about alternatives, waste minimization, talking about waste reduction, and talking about this whole question of, in some cases, we may not need certain types of facilities. And so I think talking about alternatives and getting industries and companies to change the way they do this engineering, a box in a box in a box with all this waste to throw away. So I think our movement has been able to make some shifts and changes the way that this whole idea of what we do with waste, and the fact that we should not be producing as much waste, and therefore we would not need as many facilities to site if the waste itself is minimized and reduced. And the whole question of recycling, composting, and all kinds of things that were, 20 years ago were considered just trendy, but now I think these are basic concepts and ideas that are being taken on by all kinds of organizations and city, county, state governments.
And I think the leadership that individual institutions demonstrate makes such a difference, rather than it being like you'd mentioned, communities have resources to defend themselves from having a waste facility sited within them. Hopefully, some of that emphasis is also coming from the people who are making the decisions themselves, rather than just doing it out of some defensive strategy to not invite lawsuits and things like that.
Yes, well, lawsuits are very costly, and lawsuits are very protracted, and it drags things out. And so I think, if one of the principles of environmental justice is that communities need to be involved at the table early on and throughout the process, and not some decisions that are made in an office in the dark and what we call the DAD model, decide, announce, defend. And in some cases, some of these decisions are so wacky that they are indefensible. And so it saves money, and it makes a lot of sense. And oftentimes it's common sense.
Right. And the political clout that goes along with making good decisions, I think, can't be underestimated in that respect either. So, I saw that another area that you're interested in is urban revitalization and suburban sprawl. One of your most recent books, you published 2 books this last year, right?
Yes.
smart growth. Was that it?
Yes. Yes.
That was interesting to me because it was an edited volume where you had asked leaders from a variety of areas, attorneys, government officials, NGOs, to provide guidance, recommendations as to how we would manage urban decline and suburban sprawl. Did you hear any common themes from these experts who you'd drawn together in this way?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it was a Ford Foundation project that we put together, and that book came out of that project. It was the idea of if we would pull together people who deal with transportation, urban land use, housing, economic and community development, pull them together in a room, and let's talk about not just smart growth, but growing smarter and growing fairer and equitable development and those kinds of issues, dealing with equity running throughout the theme. And what we found is that the central theme that ran throughout is that the fact that we are a metropolitan country. We are a suburban nation. And the fact that if we are to have a healthy region, a healthy metropolitan region, we have to have a healthy central city. And that we're looking at those trends and how cities now are rediscovering their downtowns and beginning to put more and more money into the downtowns. And I stayed in a downtown Grand Rapids. I'm really impressed with what's happening downtown, and I think that revitalization of having a healthy core can expand and grow and really make the entire region prosperous. And when we talk about transportation, we talk about housing affordability, we talk about walkable communities, we're talking basically having schools that kids can take walk to school, safe walk routes and bike. We're dealing with health issues like obesity, childhood obesity, having neighborhoods that are designed such that they do have full service grocery stores, access to healthy foods, fruits and vegetables. These are all designed, built environment issues that impact our health and our quality of life. Green space, parks, these are things that we know common sense, but oftentimes our planners don't come together. Sociologists and psychologists, we all have our own meetings, professional meetings, and we don't come together. And so that was this concept was to bring them together, and actually MIT Press published that book, and the title of the book is Growing Smarter, Achieving Livable Communities, Environmental Justice, and Regional Equity, and it's hit a note.
Good. I'm glad. The theme that seems to run through a lot of your work is social justice and social equity, and I think that as we develop an understanding that social equity affects all of us, not just people who have or do not have, but it affects all of us. I think the more recognized that is, the less of a struggle it will be to bring those principles to fruition. So
yeah, that's what we've been trying to say all along. When we talk about air quality and cities that are regions that are in non-attainment, and we say in terms of air quality, we say that there's no black air, there's no Hispanic air, there's no white air, there's air that we all breathe. And if we are to address these issues, I think we have to deal with it from that context. The dirty air does not stop at Grand Rapids city limits, or Kent County. If the area is in non-attainment, that means you have to deal with these issues in a regional context. And so what we've said is that the equity runs throughout, and if we are to put that at the center, then I think we can talk about how we can work together.
No, I agree. That's very, very. I think a theme that a lot of us can relate to as well. Hopefully, more and more of us as we become more familiar with it. Do you find that you have to struggle to maintain your energy and vitality to keep this pressure on? Essentially, that's what one of the things that you're doing is keeping this in front of everybody, so they have to continue to deal with it until they start recognizing that they should be dealing with it anyway. So, do you find that that's an exhausting challenge for you?
Well, it's not really exhausting from the standpoint of physically. I think 20 years ago, it was just a few of us. I could name all the people who was doing this work on one hand and have 3 fingers left over. But today, because of the fact that we've been able to get a lot of our work into classrooms, We've been able to write articles and books and reports, and we've done a few videos and that have really made PBS, et cetera. So we have more people doing this work now, so I don't have to do everything by myself. And so it means that you still have to keep a pace to keep these issues on the front burner, because in some cases some people will say, well, we did that 10 years ago. We thought we solved that problem. And so you have to let people understand that just because it drops off the radar or drops off the media scene doesn't mean that has always been the issue has always been resolved or solved. So it means that you have to constantly stay on guard and get people aware and bring more young people into the fold to work on these issues. And it's one thing I can say that may be a silver lining with the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans and the Gulf Coast is that it really reinvigorated the young people's idea of what it means to volunteer, to give up spring breaks, to go down and work in Louisiana and Mississippi when they could be going to Florida or Texas or wherever. So that rise in volunteerism and wanting to help and assist, that from all over the country, people came down and are coming down. I think it really invigorates this whole idea that we are one nation. We need to work together, pull together. When there's a tragedy or a catastrophe, you can see it brings out the best of us when it comes to working together. And I think what we're trying to do is build a spirit of cooperation and working together before disasters hit, and in case of slow-moving disasters, and trying to deal with many of these issues like children health issues, that we know that children are our future, and if a nation is judged by the way it treats its children, and lead poisoning is a preventable disease, rising asthma rates, and lots of issues that we need to deal with. I think we are falling behind, so I think we need to address these issues, and the more we talk about them and get people in policy positions working on these issues, I think we can come closer to having solutions.
Yeah, the issues that you talk about with respect to just air quality affecting urban environments, I mean, that should be an issue that we deal with just because of the pain and suffering that's associated with that. But ultimately, we may end up dealing with it because of the financial costs associated with managing it. So, but again, making sure that everybody is aware of it. What I saw that you're trained as a sociologist. How do you bring your science to what it is that you do?
Well, as a sociologist, we like to look at behavior, organizations, and complex organizations, and the interactions of people in their society. And I tell people that I am a sociologist. I'm a trained sociologist. I'm an environmentalist. I'm a scholar. I'm an activist. I'm all those things. And I think being trained as a sociologist and being trained to work with data and with large data sets and working with people, I think I have the best of both worlds. And the fact that for a long time my parents didn't know what a sociologist was or what I did, but I think over the years they realized that what I do, I think they were very proud of what I do because of having impacting just ordinary people and people in communities that may not know what a sociologist is, but they know what some of the results are from the work that we do, from the research as well as some of the policy.
I can imagine your parents are very proud of you.
Yes.
I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your center, your Environmental Justice Resource Center.
Yeah, the center was founded by me in 1994. I left California. I was a sociologist at the University of California, Riverside, and I was flying back, taking red eyes back to the East Coast, monthly, and I wanted to set up a center, and I wanted to put it at a historically black college and university, my alma mater. I guess where I got my master's from. And our center basically is a research center. We say we're not a think tank, we're a think/act tank. And so our center, we do research, we do training, we work with communities and assist them. In some cases, we provide legal assistance, expert witness testimony. We have internships for our students to do work with communities all across the country. And so there are only about 4 centers like ours in the whole country. And we work in partnership with other universities. For example, we have a strong partnership with the University of Michigan in the School of Natural Resources, Bunyan Bryan and Paul Mohai, who we worked with for last 20 years. And so we work with other centers across the country, mental health, public health, and other planning schools. And so we said that we like to house people who are very interdisciplinary in our center to work on all kinds of issues, from regional planning to housing to transportation to health, and et cetera. And so that's what we do. And we have a very small staff. We only have 8 staff people, and we have about 20 faculty affiliates. But people know us for what we do, and we don't do everything, but what we do it well.
It sounds like you also do a really nice job of bringing people together. That edited volume, I think, again, is a wonderful example of that. People aren't really aware of the fact that other people are doing work that lines up with their own passions, and that's a real powerful role to unite people like that.
Yeah, well, that's what we like to do. We like to bring people together in meetings, forums, roundtables, conferences, symposia, and try to get this thinking cross-fertilization going on, and not just having the conference, but what happens after the conference is important. The relationships and networks that are built, and that's where I think our strong suits are. We try to get people together in the room and try to raise funds to do that, so that people don't have to come out of their pockets to do it, and give scholarships for that to happen. And we've been successful so far, and we're satisfied. We're pleased, but there's always resources that's the major hindering.
Yeah. Is that the primary impediment then? It's not interest, because there's a lot of interest, but just the resources to fund these kinds of efforts.
It's a lot of interest. We get calls and emails from people who want to come down and do a short stint with us to do a study, postdoc, or student want to do an internship, and usually it's resources, space, and resources, and so we do some of that in a limited way, but we are a very small center, and we know our limitations and we know our strengths, and so we like to work in collaboration, even with the environmental groups, working in a collaborative way with them, and when we can provide resources that in terms of our strengths and collaborate with them, we do that. And we do much more of that today than we did 20 years ago, since many of the environmental groups now understand exactly what environmental justice is and what we are about.
We're about out of time for this morning. Before we close, though, is there a recommendation that you would have, or some guidance you could give for people who are interested in becoming more active in this area? What are things that just regular people can do to help further the cause of environmental justice and social equity?
I think it's important that everyone understands that they can make a difference, that there are lots of organizations that are working on these issues, faith-based, civic clubs, environmental organizations. Some organizations may not even have environment in their name, but are probably working on issues that deal with the environment, how we define environment. So I think it's important to seek out groups that are working on these issues and join and assist and become active, because a lot of our organizations need young people. They need resources, volunteers for this, and I think it's important that we do this locally. We don't have to travel all the way to Brazil to deal with these issues. Brazil is nice, but we don't have to go all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. I want to thank you again for taking the time out to talk with us today, and I can't wait to have you come back in March, and I can hear more about what you have to say.
Thank you.
Dr. Robert Bullard, I'm Michael Vargo, and that's it. Thanks.